All right. None of this video has anything to do with whether or not Bill Cosby is innocent. This video has to do with whether or not Bill Cosby got a fair trial, and indeed if there's any evidence that Bill Cosby was guilty of the sexual abuse claims made against him. Did Bill Cosby get a fair trial? No, not even close. It's ridiculous. Is Bill Cosby the only man to get a fucking kangaroo court trial like this for political reasons? Far from it. In fact, you're going to be seeing this all the time in the current progressive paradigm. Was there any evidence that Bill Cosby was guilty? No. None. Was the law in any way respected in Bill Cosby's trial? No. Was the prosecution against Bill Cosby illegal and thrown out because it was illegal? Yes. Does the law exist in America when things like this happen repeatedly? No. You're going to be seeing this all the time. All the fucking time. Here's the important things that have to do with Bill Cosby's case. Okay, 1. The first 3 accusers to come out and accuse him were found not credible. They had no credibility. One of them even showed up drunkenly on CNN stammering or high on drugs or something and just yammered and stared wide-eyed into the camera. Her name was, I think, Caitlin Dickinson or something like that. You can look her up. She's a lunatic. Those 3 women were the first women to ever accuse him of anything. They were all 3 found uncredible. Only after they had come in and started talking with prosecution about pursuing a case against Bill Cosby did another 57 women, most of which are nameless and anonymous, come out and accuse him of anything. Have any of those claims ever been corroborated? No. Would you like to know how Bill Cosby was prosecuted in the first place? After the first few accusers accused him, a district attorney came in and reviewed the claims and said, there is no way we can prosecute this. There's no physical evidence. They actually did a warrant on Cosby's home looking for anything related to drugging women or possession of illegal narcotics or anything. They found nothing. The initial claims against him involved the very classic, we have no evidence, and in fact have evidence to the contrary that you were in the same place as Cosby at this time, and then the accusers repeatedly changed what time, changed what year, in fact changed what decade their claims supposedly happened. It was very clearly bullshit, all right? But that is not what the problem is here. That kind of lying bullshit from accusers is common and is usually dealt with by our justice system. You can't just get away with charging somebody, let alone convicting somebody along those lines. It usually doesn't fly. It does sometimes, unfortunately, for similar, very political, railroaded reasons. But the problem is, after that DA makes an agreement, a legal agreement, with Cosby that he will not be prosecuted, because of that, a civil case was brought. A suit against Cosby was brought by the accusers, in which, in that suit, you don't have a Fifth Amendment right because there was an agreement with a DA saying we can't charge you with criminal malfeasance on this case. Therefore, you don't have a right to walk into your deposition on this case and plead the Fifth. You have to answer these questions and answer these truthfully, or you'll be guilty of perjury and contempt of court, and you'll go to jail. Now, in that deposition was never sealed or anything like that. And then another DA comes in and wants to run, and he's saying, I'm going to prosecute Bill Cosby. And he loses. So that DA doesn't get the job, and another DA gets the job. And I think there was a whole nother DA after this. It's not important whether or not I'm remembering if there was a whole nother DA after this. The important thing is the DA who eventually does come in and does decide to prosecute Bill Cosby is a man who also ran with nonstop political advertisements, commercials saying, my first day in office, I'm going to throw the book at Bill Cosby. He gets in, throws the book at Bill Cosby and charges him. The other loser who lost the DA race 1 or 2 DA races ago, who did the same thing saying, I am going to prosecute Bill Cosby, was the judge in this case. That is a legal conflict of interest. You have a judge who is supposed to be impartial in reviewing the law. This guy's name is something O'Brien. I forget which. I'll look it up and I'll put some names in the description because, again, the names are not important. What's important is that this judge did a whole political campaign saying, I'm going to prosecute and convict Bill Cosby. He is now the judge in Bill Cosby's criminal rape trial. The DA also said in commercials, in communications with the public, in press releases, I'm going to prosecute Bill Cosby. He's the DA. The first DA, who accurately looked at this case and went, some of these claims that are coming out, statute of limitations is over and done with. Okay? Can't prosecute on them to begin with. These other claims are uncorroborated, unsubstantiated, likely false, can't prosecute. So the defense for Bill Cosby calls in this original DA and says, okay, like, did you have an agreement with Bill Cosby that you wouldn't prosecute because there's not enough evidence for an indictment? He said, yes. And it says, as a result of this, this is all in his statement. I don't know if he even got a chance to say all this in court. We'll get to that in a second. He says, okay, so as a result of the statement, Cosby was not allowed to plead the fifth in an upcoming civil trial. So he had to give answers without being able to plead the fifth in that deposition. And those answers included admissions that he had given women drugs. Not that he had raped women, that he had given women drugs in the 70s and 80s. Like, oh yeah, a celebrity gave women cocaine and Quaaludes and whatever. Is that actually anything out of the ordinary? No. And so under these circumstances, keep in mind that the current criminal prosecution of Bill Cosby, one of their only pieces of evidence that he's done anything wrong, is this deposition where he did not have his constitutional right to plead the fifth because it was a civil matter and not a criminal matter. And that it is illegal, in fact, that this current prosecution is using this basically entrapment and double jeopardy all in one great big box. It's illegal to use this evidence. And in the former DAs, the guy who refused to prosecute, he says, well, yes, this is all illegal. So he wasn't allowed to present that evidence in court because the judge who ran multiple political campaigns on the I will prosecute and throw Bill Cosby in jail line, declared this DA, whom he lost to in one run, he said, this is a hostile witness. I'm throwing out his testimony. Fuck off. That's illegal. This judge needs to be disbarred or defrocked or whatever the fuck the word is for throwing a judge off the bench and perhaps even pursuing criminal charges against him because what he's doing is massively illegal. Same with the other DA. The other evidence in the eventual conviction of Bill Cosby on these rape charges or sexual misconduct charges was a bunch of women coming in and testifying, saying he did this to me at this point back in the day, past the statute of limitations for the crime I'm accusing him of. Do I have any physical evidence? No. Do I have any corroborating evidence? No. Did any of these women pursue any kind of legal or even civil pursuit of justice against Cosby at any point in the 30-plus years since they made their claims? No. Are you allowed to bring in a bunch of character assassination witnesses who are uncorroborated, who've never pressed charges, who've never got any convictions over Cosby, who much of their claims are completely unrelated to the specific claims made of malfeasance in this case? Are you allowed to parade these kind of character assassination witnesses into a courtroom to the tune of 6 of them and use that as evidence to get a conviction, along with an illegally obtained and, in fact, dishonestly edited and portrayed part of his, what do you call it? His deposition in the civil case. Are you allowed to do that? No. This is the conviction, though, which had the same DA and the same judge, was not the first time Cosby is criminally tried in this specific case. It is the second time. The first time ended in a hung jury, as in the jury refused to come to a decision of either guilt or innocence. The second time, there were jurors on camera saying, "We won't be deliberating on this case very long. Cosby is guilty." To the press. They said this to the press. At least one juror did this. To the camera, to the press, saying, "We won't be deliberating very long. Cosby is guilty." Before the trial started. Before the trial started. That is known as what is an instantaneous mistrial. Absolutely instant mistrial. The judge was told about this in the courtroom and did not give a shit. Because again, this judge was not a fair and impartial judge, nor was this a judge who used the law to get what was clearly malicious and targeted political attack done. He used every illegal means available to him to break the law, to ignore any and all challenges to those motions that would have barred that use of illegal evidence, or would have gotten the case thrown out because the case itself is illegal on multiple fucking levels. Many fucking levels, okay? And on top of all that, this is a judge colluding with the prosecutor to prevent the law from happening. And then Cosby got to spend a year under, I forget if it's house arrest or if he actually went to prison. And this whole thing has been dragged out for at least 10 years, okay? Or 15 years. This process where the first case that was brought against Cosby was thrown out was in 2005. It's now 2021, and they're still trying to railroad this guy. Do I know for a fact, or do I find it completely convincing that Cosby is innocent of any and all sexual misconduct? I don't have enough to come to an ironclad decision on that case. Do I see any significant or irrefutable or in any way any kind of solid evidence whatsoever, even circumstantial, that he is guilty of sexual misconduct? No. Now, what I want to warn you about is all of us see all the time cases that are clearly bullshit, and we're willing to speak out about those. But there are these certain cases that come up that, because before we start thinking about it, the media becomes saturated with malicious and dishonest reporting on the case. And I don't recall ever seeing a person who thought Cosby was innocent, no matter, when they were talking about the case or whatever. I don't recall a single pundit or acquaintance or peer of mine or friend of mine who ever mentioned anything about Cosby. And he became a joke. Like many of these cases, jokes are being told about a guy before there's any evidence whatsoever that he's guilty, and we just joke like, oh yeah, just because Hollywood is absolutely full of rapists, and Bill Cosby may still in fact be one of them, we don't have any real reason to suspect that he is, but because Hollywood is a den of rapists and sexual perverts and child rapists and molesters, and Cosby is one of the most powerful men to ever be in media over the past 60 years, we could just assume that he's guilty. That's an unhealthy frame of mind, and we should avoid having that kind of frame of mind about anybody. And this very much mirrors the case of James Fields, the guy who forever became the Antifa and far leftists' evidence that, well, okay, Nazis killed at least one person and Antifa's killed none. Meanwhile, we still have Nazis have killed at least one person and Antifa has killed over 100 in the past 10 years. And I'm sure there's been a handful more white supremacist shooters since then, but Antifa's got us beat at least 5-1 on murdering people. And they have us beat about 50,000-1 on random unprovoked assaults, property destruction, terrorist attacks, all that kind of shit. But James Fields was, yes, in that tiki torch white supremacist Jews will not replace us protest. He was there. And again, I've talked at length about how that protest was deliberately by the mayor of that Charlottesville, as well as the police force of Charlottesville. The violence was deliberately caused. Okay, there was the park where these white supremacists were, had multiple outlets. The police surrounded them. These were permitted protesters who did not do anything violent and did not destroy any property. Okay, so these white supremacists, yes, white supremacy bad. Were they doing anything criminal there? No. Were they legally permitted to be there? Yes. Were they illegally forced out of the area? Yes. Were they forced out of the area away from counter-protesters, or were they corralled, surrounded by police, and pushed straight into counter-protesters from Antifa that outnumbered them like 10-1 at least? Yes. Was that deliberate? Yes. And did violence result as a result of that deliberate pushing of these two groups into each other? Yes. James Field, amongst this group, was in a car, and I think he'd picked up a few people he didn't know and was trying to get out of there because Antifa was beating people with sticks and bricks. Antifa was armed. Some of the white supremacists were armed too. So as James Field gets into his car, there's a bunch of bricks and shit being thrown in his car. One of the windows gets busted out. People are charging the car with baseball bats. A man is seen on camera approaching the car with an AK-47, I believe. He at least had some kind of semi-automatic rifle platform, and pointed it at them, and they fled. And as they were in the course of their fleeing, Heather Heyer, the victim, was in the middle of the fucking road as James Field is careening down the street, fleeing people trying to kill him, essentially, and is hit, and subsequently has a heart attack from her injuries. The injuries from being hit weren't immediately the cause of her fatality, but they were the cause of the heart distress due to the fact that Heather Heyer was like 650 pounds. She was an absolute fucking whale, so it makes sense that she had a heart attack. Just as a result of this, which, with my limited legal knowledge, and of course I'm not in any way able to give legal advice, that's a legal disclaimer, of course, even though I'm not even trying to, or even alluding to what legal advice is. I'm discussing the law of this case. You could say that was a negligent vehicular manslaughter. That's a 4 to 7 year charge. At least to reckless driving, maybe. Dude, he was charged on like terrorism counts, federal fucking like terrorism counts, first degree murder, as in he somehow premeditated killing this person he's never met before who was just in the street. And he was given 114 years in prison. And of course that case is never discussed because James Field's a Nazi. So the fact that evidence of everything I said that basically clearly shows that the man was only guilty of vehicular manslaughter at best was thrown out by the judge. And witnesses that would have testified to his innocence or been able to testify to his complete non-premeditation of violence, and that there's no evidence that he premeditated any kind of violence in relation to this white supremacist protest, thrown out by the judge. It was a kangaroo court illegal trial, and that man will probably never get out of jail because no one will ever stick up for him because he's not Bill Cosby. He's some random fucking dumbass, and he will never get out of jail. Ever. Ever. And what he did was an accident. But he was found guilty of premeditated fucking terrorism and murder. It's ridiculous. Derek Chauvin. What did he get, like 27 years? On just the first degree fucking murder charge? Zero evidence of premeditation. Best you can get is murder too. Any evidence that he deliberately killed the guy? None. What do you get? Negligent homicide? Manslaughter? Maximum sentence for those kind of charges? Less than half of what the guy got? Was he even guilty of those? No. Was there any evidence that Chauvin died as a result of his Floyd died as a result of his physical interaction with Derek Chauvin? No, he died of a severe fentanyl overdose. Oh, he asphyxiated. Yeah, he was in respiratory distress because his entire respiratory system was shutting down because he was overloaded on one of the fucking strongest narcotics that's out on the street right now that kills people by the dozens. And dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens every year because so many drug dealers are going, well, I could put a good amount of heroin into this product so that it is strong, or I could put what is essentially was it like an anesthetic? It's an anesthesia thing, like used by surgeons. It's incredibly dangerous. It takes virtually the teeniest, tiniest amount of this shit in your system to kill you, and George Floyd basically swallowed a open baggie of it before the police arrived on site and died within minutes as a result of that, as you would on a fentanyl overdose that was proven by multiple coroners. It's in the fucking blood tox screen. Done. Did Chauvin get a fair trial? No. Was there evidence of jury nullification and jury tampering in that trial? Yes. Did jurors admit that they were basically nullifying the law and that they were going to go in there and seek to find Chauvin guilty? Were they on camera doing that before, during, and after the trial? Yes. There's like no fucking way that's not getting appealed. Did judges do everything they could to try to prevent the defense, which was a very good defense? He didn't try as hard and as illegally to suppress defense's ability to show completely that Chauvin was innocent. But he did try. He was clearly prejudiced towards the prosecution, prejudiced against the defense and with the prosecution. And the judge was clearly aware of jurors, and the prosecution was aware of jurors' attempts to nullify the verdict because they didn't even hide that they were doing it. And believe me, if you're going to do jury nullification, you need to not be open about it. And you need to lie about your intent to nullify the result of a criminal trial, which means that you are going to ignore the law in order to seek a certain result because you believe that whatever crime the defendant is absolutely guilty of, they should not be guilty of, or indeed the fact that there is no evidence that the defendant is guilty of a crime, but you intend to punish them for your belief about that crime anyways. That's jury nullification. And in some ways, because the law, even to the extent that it does exist, and it does not exist, but to the extent of it, what the law is on paper, there are many things that should not be illegal. I somewhat think that it's perfectly reasonable for any given juror who's faced in a drug trial to have the intent to nullify the result, no matter how it's proven of the possession or distribution of drugs in the trial, because drugs should not be illegal in the way that they are illegal, especially certain drugs, maybe not all of them. Okay, maybe not like fucking fentanyl or methamphetamine or heroin, but certainly with marijuana or ecstasy or other pretty much less dangerous or even not at all dangerous drugs like marijuana and less dangerous like ecstasy. I understand that. But there are also people who got O.J. Simpson off, were open and honest about jury nullification. There were jurors who were saying, this is what you get white people for beating up Rodney King. We know this guy's guilty. We don't care. Jurors said that. You're getting that with Chauvin. You're getting that now with... But the thing is, jury nullification is scary enough. When the judge has an open, on paper, on commercials, on broadcast television, conflict of interest in a case. This happened with some of the fucking Trump University shit. Okay? There's a difference of some people saying, oh, Trump's just a racist and he thinks a Mexican judge will always rule against him. No, the Mexican judge was a member of a Mexican supremacist group, basically, or at the very least, most charitably put, a brotherhood of Latino lawyers and whatever the fuck, and judges. But that judge had also said on paper all sorts of malicious beliefs that he has about Trump. And how can you, in press releases, in fucking interviews, on fucking camera say, I have these kind of prejudices against Donald Trump, and then you just get to be that guy's judge? It's weird enough that prosecutors and judges can be friends. That's already seems like enough of a conflict of interest to me, but these people talk out of school all the time. That's normal. It's just what is always happening. But when both guys have an on paper, in press releases, on camera, on national news, saying, I have a bias towards this case that I will pursue, and then they're allowed to be in every position of power in order to subvert and usurp the law to seek a biased result in the case, that can't be allowed to happen. And yet it is allowed to happen repeatedly. That is, when I say the law doesn't exist in this country, it's not because the culture is being subverted. It's not because people are lying about what is and isn't the law, or lying about politics, or lying about this, that, and the other thing. It's because these progressives, communists, social democrats, whatever you want to call them, the fucking new Democrats, the Justice Democrats, what these people are basically socialist communist infiltrators. They are anti-white, anti-America, and this is not an exaggeration of any kind. These people are openly hostile in their own words towards the concept of this country and the concept of whiteness. And these people are getting into district attorney jobs and judgeships. They're getting elected in all these places because guys like George Soros, but George Soros is not the only kind of ultra-rich banker who's doing this, is going into districts and races for district attorney and judges and commissioners and whatnot. And it's a race in some area, some county, where the average campaign funds in order for people to run against each other is an average of around $50,000. And a guy like George Soros will go into this race and back the socialist, Democrat, fucking terrorist candidate to the tune of, $10 to $12 million. You show up to the fucking race, you got 50 grand. This guy's running 2 commercials per fucking second on TV. It's on radio. There's billboards everywhere. There's teams and teams of people knocking on doors. And you want to wonder why. They're judges who should not be judges, attorneys who should not be attorneys, commissioners and mayors and city council people who are fucking malignant, terroristic psychopaths. How did they get in these positions of authority? Because money in politics, the only thing progressives are right to be afraid of, except for they're the ones who use it, to the tune of light years ahead of any Republican anywhere. As well on top of fucking ballot harvesting and illegal votes and election fraud every single time, every single place. It wasn't just the 2020 presidential. It was in Arizona. It was in Georgia. It was in many counties around the country. This is the most fraudulent election year in American history, probably North American history. This kind of shit hasn't been seen in the Western first world in centuries. This is how they do this. And even if they're not being fraudulent, they're pumping hundreds of thousands of more dollars into shit than their competitors can face to get these kind of Manchurian candidates into the system. If you're wondering why rioters aren't being prosecuted in Portland or in Baltimore or in Atlanta or Minneapolis or LA County or any of these places, how do these rioters who are guilty of arson, guilty of felony assault, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, guilty of resisting arrest, of attacking police officers, how do these people keep getting released and then rearrested and released and rearrested dozens of times per fucking week? How does this happen? Because the DA is an inside man for a domestic terrorist organization in every last one of these places. Olympus has fallen. You're fucked. The law doesn't exist anywhere. Anywhere. The bad guys will never be charged, and the innocent will go to jail. And there'll be nothing you can do about it. Absolutely nothing. This is a very, very serious problem. And I don't have to say what I think is going to happen as a result of this. You know that I know that you know that I know what's going to happen when the government is completely illegitimate and is owned by terrorists with the intent of not just destroying this country, but killing you, of imprisoning you, of torturing you, of killing you. What do you think a populace that becomes aware of this fact will do in retaliation? It doesn't have to be said, does it? And in fact, talking about it, even just speculating on what could be happen, could be perceived as well, something that gets this account terminated and gets the FBI knocking on my door. So why would I even say it? I don't have to say it. You know, I know, they know what's going to start happening when the chips are down. What did the Joker say about it? Oh, yeah. Be prepared, because it doesn't matter if you want to stay out of this conflict. You will be involved, no matter how badly you don't want to be. And I'm sorry, it's not what I want, it's what they want. You have no choice.